My family is constantly comparing me to my successful cousin, and I've reached my breaking point. For as long as I can remember, my family has idolized my cousin Andrew, their golden child. A surgeon with a picture-perfect marriage and a life straight out of a magazine, Andrew was everything I was supposed to aspire to be. But for me, those comparisons weren't just frustrating, they were suffocating. Every family gathering, every conversation, every milestone was a reminder that I wasn't enough. No matter what I accomplished, I was always Andrew's cousin Jake, forever living in his shadow. But then something shocking happened. Andrew's seemingly flawless life fell apart, and for the first time, the family had to confront the truth: perfection doesn't exist. This is the story of how I stepped out of my cousin's shadow, rebuilt my confidence, and finally learned to live for myself. It's about family expectations, hidden struggles, and what happens when the pedestal crumbles. If you've ever felt overshadowed, you're not alone. Watch to find out how I found my way out. Hey Reddit, I'm Jake, 25, and I'm writing this because I'm at my wit's end. If you've ever felt like you were living in someone else's shadow, you'll probably understand. My life isn't bad. I've got a steady job as an administrative assistant, I share a decent apartment with my college buddy, and I'm trying to figure out what makes me happy. But none of that matters to my family. Why? Because of Andrew. The golden cousin. Andrew is 28 and everything I'm not, or at least that's how my family sees it. He's a surgeon, raking in a six-figure salary while living in a massive house with a pool. He married Emma, a stunning lawyer who somehow manages to look like she walked off the set of Suits. Oh, and did I mention he runs marathons for charity in his spare time? At every single family gathering, Andrew is the center of attention. Andrew just saved a life. Andrew and Emma bought a vacation home. Andrew's running a marathon for children's cancer research. Meanwhile, I'm over here with my reheated leftovers and my job that barely pays enough to cover rent. A dagger disguised as a compliment. Every time they talk about Andrew, they glance at me as if waiting for me to chime in with something equally impressive. Of course, I never do. When they finally get around to me, it's always a brief afterthought: Jake's doing fine. Do you know what fine feels like? It feels like a dagger. It feels like they're saying, he's not Andrew, but at least he's not a complete failure. The dinner that broke me. At our last family dinner, my aunt asked Andrew about his latest project. Apparently, he's developing some new surgical technique that could revolutionize the field. Everyone clapped like he'd just won an Olympic gold medal. Then my dad turned to me and said, "Jake, what's new with you?" I mumbled something about a report I finished at work and how my boss said I did a good job. My mom smiled politely and said, "That's nice," before launching into a story about how Andrew once presented a groundbreaking study at a medical conference. I wanted to disappear into the floor. Andrew isn't the problem. Or is he? Here's the thing, I don't hate Andrew. He's polite, kind, and even a little awkward at times. He doesn't brag about his accomplishments, and he never rubs his success in my face. The problem isn't him, it's how my family idolizes him while treating me like an afterthought. But sometimes, I wonder if Andrew even notices. Does he realize how his success overshadows me? Or is he so used to being the golden child that he doesn't see the effect it has on the rest of us? Living in the shadow. I don't want to be a surgeon. I don't want a mansion or a pool or a perfect wife. I just want my family to stop comparing me to Andrew like he's the gold standard for a meaningful life. I want them to see me for who I am, not as Andrew's cousin Jake, but as Jake, the guy who's trying his best to figure things out. But every time I see them, it feels like I'm back in high school, failing to measure up to the star quarterback while everyone watches from the bleachers. Why I'm writing this? Reddit, I don't know what I'm hoping to get out of this. Maybe I just needed to vent. Maybe I needed to say it out loud. I'm tired of being compared to someone else's idea of perfection. If you've ever been in my shoes, how did you deal with it? Because right now, I feel like no matter what I do, I'll always be fine, and never good enough. Hey Reddit, I'm back with another installment of my ongoing saga as the family's lesser cousin. This time, let's talk about Thanksgiving, a day that should be about gratitude and togetherness, but, in my family, is about putting Andrew, the golden child, on a pedestal while I quietly stew in the corner. The scene is set. Picture this, a long dining table, a roasted turkey as the centerpiece, and family members dressed just a little too nicely for a casual holiday. Everyone's laughing, passing around dishes, and settling in for what should be a peaceful evening. Except it's not. Not for me. My mom kicks off the dinner by sharing her favorite new Andrew story. She leans forward, a proud glint in her eye, and says, "Did everyone see Andrew in the paper last week? He was featured for his incredible work in the ER. They called him a rising star in the medical field." Cue the oohs and ahs from around the table. The comparison hits hard. Just as I'm trying to quietly mash some cranberry sauce into my potatoes, my aunt decides to turn the spotlight on me. "Jake," she says, her voice dripping with condescension, "maybe you could ask Andrew for some advice. I'm sure he could help you get on track." Get on track? I wanted to scream. I have a job. I pay my rent. I'm not living under a bridge or doing anything illegal. But no, to them, on track means being a surgeon, married to a lawyer, living in a mansion with a pool. The worst part. And here's the kicker, Andrew, sitting at the other end of the table in his perfectly pressed sweater, just smiled awkwardly and said nothing. Not a single word to shut down the comparison, to deflect, to say, "Hey, Jake's doing fine." The silence was deafening. To me, it felt like confirmation that I was, in fact, the family underachiever. I spent the rest of dinner stabbing my mashed potatoes with my fork, wishing I could vanish into thin air. The aftermath. Later, while everyone was enjoying pie and coffee, my mom cornered me in the kitchen. "You know, Jake," she said in that tone parents use when they think they're being helpful, "Andrew could really open some doors for you if you just reached out to him. He knows so many people. Why don't you talk to him about your career?" I gritted my teeth and muttered, "I'm fine, Mom." She sighed, the kind of sigh that says you're not fine, but I'll drop it for now, and walked away. Andrew's role in all this. Here's the thing, I don't think Andrew is a bad guy. He's not going out of his way to make me look bad. But his silence during moments like this? It feels like he's complicit, like he agrees that I'm not enough. Maybe he's uncomfortable with the comparisons too. Maybe he just doesn't know what to say. But a small part of me wonders if he enjoys being the golden child, even if it's at my expense. Why Thanksgiving was the breaking point. That dinner cemented what I'd been feeling for years, I'm not just Jake. I'm Andrew's cousin Jake. Every achievement I have, no matter how small or meaningful to me, is overshadowed by his latest headline-worthy accomplishment. I left Thanksgiving that night feeling like I'd been flattened by a steamroller. My family doesn't see me for who I am, they see me as who I'm not. Why I'm sharing this? Reddit, I don't know what to do. Should I confront my family about how these comparisons are tearing me apart? Should I talk to Andrew and see if he even realizes what's happening? Or do I just keep eating my mashed potatoes in silence and accept that I'll never be enough for them? If you've been in my shoes, I'd love to hear how you handled it. Because right now, I feel like I'm drowning in a sea of golden expectations, and I don't know how to swim. Hey Reddit, I'm back again, and this one stings more than anything else I've shared. It's one thing to feel overshadowed by your family's golden child, but it's a whole other level of betrayal when you realize they don't just compare you to him, they actively work against you. The decision to change. About a month after Thanksgiving, I decided to take control of my life. I'd been working as an administrative assistant for a while, but it wasn't fulfilling. I wanted more, a job that felt meaningful, something I could be proud of. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely excited about my future. I started polishing my resume, researching potential career paths, and even signed up for a few online courses to expand my skill set. Naturally, my family found out. And by found out, I mean my mom snooped through my emails when I forgot to log out of her laptop. The Andrew suggestion. When she heard I was job hunting, my mom's immediate reaction was, "You should talk to Andrew. He knows so many people. I'm sure he could help you find something better." I didn't want to involve Andrew, but my mom wouldn't let it go. "You're being stubborn, Jake," she said. "Andrew's a resource. Use him." Eventually, I caved. I called Andrew, awkwardly explaining that I was looking for new opportunities. He was polite, as always, and said, "Sure, send me your resume. I'll see if I know anyone who's hiring." I didn't expect much, but at least I could tell my mom I tried. The betrayal. A week later, I overheard my mom on the phone while I was visiting her. I wasn't eavesdropping. It was impossible not to hear her voice carrying from the kitchen. She was talking to Andrew. "Jake's been job hunting," she said, her tone light and casual. Then she laughed. "I don't think he'd last in a high-pressure job, though. He's just not cut out for it." My stomach twisted as I stood frozen in the hallway. Then Andrew's voice came through the phone, muffled but clear enough. "Yeah, I didn't think so either. I'll keep an ear out, but I'm not sure he's ready for something like that." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The one time I'd asked for help, the one time I'd swallowed my pride and reached out to Andrew, they'd both written me off. Confronting my mom. Later that day, I confronted my mom. "Why would you say that to Andrew?" I demanded. "Why would you make me sound like some incompetent idiot who can't handle a real job?" She looked at me like I was overreacting. "Jake, I was just being honest," she said. "You've never done well under pressure, and Andrew knows what it takes to succeed in demanding fields. He's only trying to help." "Help?" I said, my voice shaking. "He agreed with you. He basically admitted he's not going to recommend me to anyone. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is?" My mom shrugged. "Maybe you should start smaller. Build your confidence before trying to take on too much." I walked out of the house, fuming. It wasn't just that they doubted me, it was that they didn't even give me a chance to prove myself. How it feels. Hearing your own family dismiss you like that is crushing. It's like they've already decided who you are and what you're capable of, and nothing you do will ever change their minds. And Andrew? For all his politeness, he showed his true colors that day. I don't know if he was being smug, indifferent, or genuinely trying to protect me, but it doesn't matter. The damage is done. Why I'm writing this? Reddit, I feel stuck. How do you move forward when your own family doesn't believe in you? When even the people who claim to want the best for you are the ones holding you back? I'm trying to stay motivated, but it's hard when the people closest to you see you as a failure before you've even had a chance to succeed. If anyone's been through something like this, I could really use some advice. Hey Reddit, it's me again. If you've been following my posts, you know my family has a knack for making me feel like a second-class citizen compared to my golden child cousin, Andrew. But nothing could have prepared me for the mess that was Andrew's wedding. What should have been a celebration of love ended up being another reminder that, to my family, I'm just Andrew's cousin Jake. The wedding day. Andrew's wedding was, of course, an extravagant affair. The venue was a sprawling vineyard, complete with fairy lights strung across the trees, live musicians, and a menu so fancy I couldn't pronounce half the dishes. Everyone was dressed to the nines, and I immediately felt out of place in my rented suit. As soon as we arrived, my mom started showing me off, not as her son, but as Andrew's cousin Jake. She introduced me to one of Andrew's colleagues, a tall, intimidating surgeon, and said, "This is Jake. He's Andrew's cousin. Andrew's doing so well, isn't he?" The guy gave me a polite smile before launching into a conversation about Andrew's latest career milestone. I stood there awkwardly, nodding along as if I had any interest in Andrew's achievements. The speech that hit too close to home. The worst part of the ceremony wasn't even my mom's introductions, it was the speeches. During his toast, Andrew's dad, my uncle, gave a glowing tribute to his son. He talked about Andrew's hard work, his dedication, and how proud the family was of everything he'd accomplished. Andrew is a role model for all of us, he said, raising his glass. I felt everyone's eyes shift to me, even if it was just in my head. I wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. The conversation that broke me. Later, during the reception, my mom pulled me aside. I thought she was going to say something nice, maybe a word of encouragement, but no. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Doesn't Andrew's life inspire you to work harder? Look at everything he's accomplished." It took every ounce of self-control not to lose it. Inspire me? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Do you have any idea how it feels to constantly be compared to him? To always come up short in your eyes? She frowned like I was overreacting. I'm just saying you could learn something from him. He's worked so hard, Jake. Maybe you should try setting higher goals for yourself. It was the first time I genuinely wanted to scream at her. Instead, I swallowed my anger, muttered something about needing a drink, and walked away. Drowning my frustrations. I spent the rest of the night avoiding eye contact with everyone, nursing one overpriced cocktail after another. Every time I saw Andrew and his perfect wife, Emma, laughing and dancing, it felt like salt in the wound. It wasn't their fault, of course. Andrew wasn't the one making comparisons, and Emma had always been kind to me. But their existence, this picture-perfect life they'd built, was a constant reminder of everything I wasn't. By the end of the night, I was too tipsy to care anymore. I sat outside by the vineyard, staring at the twinkling lights and wondering if my family would ever see me as anything other than Andrew's lesser shadow. Why I'm writing this? Reddit, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. No matter how hard I try, it feels like I'll never measure up to Andrew. And the worst part? My family doesn't even realize how much their words hurt. How do you deal with being compared to someone who seems untouchable? How do you make peace with the fact that, in your family's eyes, you'll always be second best? Because right now, I feel like I'm drowning, and I don't know how to come up for air. Hey Reddit, it finally happened. After years of biting my tongue and playing the good son who quietly listens to his family rave about my cousin Andrew, I snapped. It wasn't planned. It wasn't pretty. But it was inevitable. Let me tell you about the family reunion that finally pushed me over the edge. The reunion setup. Family reunions in my family are a big deal, long tables filled with food, loud conversations, and enough small talk to make anyone's head spin. I usually keep my head down, stick to the snack table, and try to stay out of the spotlight. But this year felt different. I was already on edge from everything that had happened recently. If you've read my earlier posts, you know what I'm talking about. When Andrew showed up late, because of course he did, I knew I was in for it. Andrew's grand entrance. Andrew arrived like he always does, perfectly dressed in a designer outfit that screamed effortlessly wealthy. His hair was immaculate, his smile bright, and his wife Emma clung to his arm like the trophy she was. "Sorry we're late," he announced, as if he were a celebrity gracing us with his presence. Within seconds, my aunt had pounced, gushing about his latest accomplishment. Andrew just bought a new vacation home. Can you believe it? A beautiful place right on the lake. Everyone oohed and awed, practically drooling over the idea of this new addition to his perfect life. The moment it fell apart. Then, as if on cue, my aunt turned to me. "Jake," she said, her voice laced with faux curiosity, "what have you been up to lately?" Something in me snapped. Maybe it was the smugness in her tone, or maybe it was the weight of years of comparisons piling on top of me. Whatever it was, I didn't hold back. "Not buying vacation homes," I said sharply. The room fell silent. It wasn't the playful kind of silence that follows a good joke, it was the uncomfortable kind that makes your skin crawl. Everyone stared at me like I'd just flipped the table over. Andrew looked at me with wide eyes, clearly unsure of what to say. My mom's face turned a deep shade of red, and I could practically hear her screaming, "Why can't you just behave?" in her head. The aftermath. I left the table shortly after, needing to cool off. But of course, my mom followed me. What was that about? She hissed, pulling me aside. You were being so rude. Rude? I shot back. Rude is spending my entire life being compared to Andrew like I'm some kind of failure. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to hear about how perfect he is, while everything I do is barely acknowledged? She stared at me, stunned, before finally muttering, "You're being bitter. Andrew has worked hard for what he has. Maybe you should focus on yourself instead of tearing him down." Her words were like gasoline on a fire. I don't care how hard he's worked. I snapped. I'm tired of being treated like I'm nothing just because I'm not him. For once, can't you just be proud of me for who I am? I didn't wait for her response. I grabbed my coat, walked out of the house, and drove home in silence. Why I'm writing this? That moment felt like a breaking point for me, but now I don't know what comes next. My family doesn't seem to realize how much their comparisons have hurt me, and I don't know how to make them understand. Reddit, what do you do when your family refuses to see you for who you are? When they measure your worth against someone else's accomplishments? Because right now, I feel like I'm stuck in a losing battle, and I don't know if I'll ever win. Hey Reddit, after my outburst at the family reunion, I figured things would only get worse. I expected more comparisons, more judgment, and maybe even a lecture from Andrew himself. But what actually happened left me stunned. The call I didn't expect. About a week after the reunion, my phone rang. It was Andrew. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Part of me didn't want to deal with whatever he was going to say, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey," I said cautiously. "Hey, Jake," he replied. His tone wasn't what I expected. It wasn't smug or condescending. It sounded sincere. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he began. "For how things went down at the reunion. And for, well, everything." His apology. I was floored. Andrew? Apologizing? The golden child of the family, admitting fault? It felt surreal. "I hate how they compare us too," he continued. "It's exhausting. Every time I visit, it's like they're waiting for me to perform, to live up to this image they've created of me. And I know it's not fair to you." I didn't know what to say. For years, I'd built up this resentment toward him, blaming him for how my family treated me. But hearing him acknowledge it, it was like a weight I didn't even realize I was carrying started to lift. The shocking confession. Then Andrew dropped a bombshell. "Jake, my life isn't perfect," he said. "Not even close." He went on to explain that he was drowning in medical school debt. "I'm talking 6 figures," he said. "I'm barely keeping my head above water." And his marriage? It wasn't the fairy tale everyone thought it was. "Emma and I fight all the time," he admitted. "About money, about time, about everything. Sometimes I think the only reason we're still together is because of how everyone else sees us. It's like we're stuck playing these roles, and neither of us knows how to get out of it." Hearing him say that felt like a slap in the face, not because I was angry, but because it shattered the illusion I'd been holding onto for so long. "I'm not the golden boy. I'm not the golden boy they think I am," Andrew said quietly. "I wish they'd stop putting me on a pedestal. It's like, every time they praise me, it's not really about me. It's about this version of me they've made up in their heads. And I can't keep up with it anymore." For the first time, I saw Andrew not as the perfect cousin I'd always envied, but as a human being with his own struggles and insecurities. What it meant to me. That conversation changed everything. It didn't erase the years of resentment I'd built up, but it made me realize that Andrew wasn't the villain in my story. He was just as trapped by our family's expectations as I was, maybe even more so. By the end of the call, we weren't just cousins anymore. We were 2 people who understood each other in a way no one else in our family ever could. Why I'm sharing this? Reddit, I don't know what comes next. I still have a lot of anger toward my family for the way they've treated me, but I'm starting to see that Andrew isn't the enemy. Maybe we've both been victims of a system we didn't create but were forced to live in. If you've ever felt like you're living in someone's shadow, I want you to know that sometimes, the person casting that shadow might feel just as trapped as you do. And maybe, just maybe, they want to step out of it too. Hey Reddit, if you've been following my posts, you know my cousin Andrew has always been the golden child of the family, praised, idolized, and held up as the example I could never live up to. But a few weeks ago, the cracks in his perfect life finally shattered, and let me tell you, it's been a wild ride watching the family dynamic flip on its head. The start of the scandal. It all started with a rumor. My mom called me one evening with her trademark, "You'll never guess what I just heard" tone. Emma, she said, referring to Andrew's wife, was caught having an affair. My immediate reaction was disbelief. Emma, the picture-perfect lawyer, married to Andrew, the perfect surgeon? It didn't make sense. With who? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Her personal trainer, Mom said, practically whispering as though Emma might hear her through the phone. Apparently, someone in the family spotted Emma at a cafe, holding hands with a man who was very much not Andrew. Pictures were taken, and within hours, the story spread through the family like wildfire. The fallout begins. The next family group chat was chaos. Everyone was texting back and forth, sharing the photos, speculating about how Andrew was handling it, and, this part made me laugh, expressing shock that someone as perfect as Andrew could have a marriage that wasn't flawless. By the end of the day, the news was out, Emma had admitted to the affair. She and Andrew were taking time apart, and their marriage was officially on the rocks. The Whisper campaign. What followed was like watching a bizarre soap opera unfold in real time. For years, the family had only whispered about Andrew's achievements, but now, those whispers turned into something darker. "I heard they'd been having problems for years," one aunt said during a phone call. "Did you know Andrew's drowning in debt?" another relative chimed in. And just like that, the narrative shifted. Andrew was no longer the untouchable golden child. He was a man with a crumbling marriage, financial struggles, and a life that wasn't as perfect as it had seemed. The awkward family dinner. A week after the news broke, there was a small family dinner. Normally, these gatherings revolved around Andrew's latest accomplishments. But this time, no one brought him up. Not once. Andrew sat at the table, quieter than I'd ever seen him, poking at his food while everyone carefully avoided eye contact. The air was thick with unspoken tension, like we were all waiting for someone to address the elephant in the room, but no one dared. It was almost funny, in a way. For years, Andrew had been the center of attention, and now the family didn't know how to handle his fall from grace. How I felt. If I'm being honest, I didn't feel schadenfreude or joy at seeing Andrew's life fall apart. If anything, I felt bad for him. We'd had a heartfelt conversation just weeks earlier where he admitted how exhausting it was to keep up the facade of perfection. Now, that facade had been ripped away for everyone to see. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. For the first time, the family wasn't idolizing Andrew. They weren't comparing me to him or asking why I couldn't be more like him. Instead, they were realizing that no one, not even their golden child, is perfect. What now? I don't know what's next for Andrew. He's clearly struggling, and I hope he gets the support he needs to pick up the pieces. But for me, this whole ordeal has been a wake-up call. Maybe I've spent too much time resenting Andrew when, in reality, we've both been victims of the family's unrealistic expectations. Reddit, it's been a wild few weeks. If you've ever dealt with a family that idolizes one person and ignores everyone else, let me know how you handled it, because now that the pedestal has crumbled, I'm not sure where we all go from here. Hey Reddit, it's been a long journey, but I think I've finally turned a corner. If you've followed my previous posts, you know my life has been defined by comparisons to my cousin Andrew, the family's golden child. For years, I lived in his shadow, feeling like I could never measure up. But after the recent scandal that rocked our family, everything has changed. The comparisons finally stopped. After news of Andrew's failing marriage and financial struggles spread through the family, something incredible happened. They stopped comparing us. For the first time in years, no one asked me why I wasn't more like Andrew. At the next family gathering, there was no talk of his achievements, no stories about his marathon runs or surgical breakthroughs. Instead, the focus shifted to smaller, more human things. My aunt asked how work was going, not in a, "why aren't you doing more with your life?" way, but in a genuine, curious way. My mom even mentioned how proud she was of how I'd handled myself recently. It felt different. Like the pressure had lifted. Reconnecting with Andrew. The biggest surprise has been my relationship with Andrew. After everything that happened, he reached out again. We went for a drink, and for the first time, it felt like we were just two cousins hanging out, not the golden child and the other one. Andrew opened up even more about his struggles. He admitted he felt relieved in a strange way that the scandal had forced the family to see him as a real person, not the pedestal perfect version they created. "It's exhausting trying to live up to their expectations," he told me. I don't know why I didn't say something sooner. We laughed about how ridiculous some of the family's antics had been, and for the first time, I didn't feel resentment toward him. He wasn't my rival. He was just a guy trying to figure things out, like me. Focusing on myself. With the comparisons gone, I've started to reevaluate what I want out of life. For so long, I felt like I was competing in a race I never signed up for, trying to prove my worth to people who only saw me as Andrew's cousin. But now? I'm done with that. I've started focusing on the things that make me happy, taking up hobbies I'd pushed aside, like photography and writing. I'm even considering going back to school part-time to study something I'm passionate about. I'm not chasing a six-figure salary or a perfect house. I'm just trying to build a life that feels fulfilling to me. Lessons learned. If this whole ordeal has taught me anything, it's that no one's life is as perfect as it seems. For years, I thought Andrew had it all, the career, the marriage, the admiration of everyone around him. But behind the scenes, he was struggling just as much as I was, if not more. It's easy to look at someone else's highlight reel and feel like you're falling short. But the truth is, we're all just doing our best, and comparing yourself to others only makes the journey harder. Moving forward. Now, when I look at Andrew, I don't see a golden child or a villain. I see a human being, just like me. And when I look at myself, I don't see someone who's not good enough anymore. I see someone who's trying, growing, and figuring things out at their own pace. To anyone out there who's ever felt overshadowed, know this. You are more than someone else's comparison. The only person you need to measure yourself against is the person you were yesterday. Thanks for listening, Reddit. This feels like the start of something new for me, and for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about what's ahead.